And I think, JJ, it's a time for another poll.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. Yeah, so we wanted to ask you before we continue, just ask all of you in the audience another quick question. And this is on what trending tools you all use today, just to give us an idea of what you're working with currently, to understand the data better of your clusters, whether it's Cacti or Moonin or Graphite. Maybe use other tools, or maybe you do something yourself in-house. That happens a lot as well. So thank you for participating in this poll. Just to give us a quick overview of your usage of training tools today. And also just to remind you that you can ask questions at any moment in the question section of your control panel. So feel free to ask us questions there. We'll answer them towards the end of the webinar. Great, so thanks for your participation. I'm just going to close the poll and share the results, of course. Okay, so it seems that most of you use other tools than the ones we listed. And other than that is Cacti and Graphite, a lot of DIY as well. So a lot of you are doing your own kind of trending in-house, which is interesting. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Christoph?
Well, actually, there are a bunch of monitoring tools and trending tools out there, so I'm not really that surprised that others is pretty popular. And yeah, well, actually, the do-it-yourself, I would say, it is pretty popular out there because pretty often people tend to tailor their own monitoring and graphing solutions for their own needs. So this is, yeah, I would say this is something we kind of could expect.
Great. Okay, thank you. And back to you.
Okay, so now let's talk about a bit about host metrics, so why they are important in regard to Galera cluster. So what they are for, that's the first thing. Well, first of all, we need the host metrics to understand the utilization of the hardware. Because obviously we are using this hardware for a Galera, for MySQL, so we are somewhat constrained by its limits. So we want to know whether we are closing to these limits or we still have some room for growth. And it leads us to the capacity planning. Yes, we want to know how many resources we are using and at what rate we are consuming it. And then based on this information, we want to know when we should plan for some changes, for some upgrades, new disks, adding new nodes, larger disks, more memory, this kind of information. And also, we could use host metrics to determine the type of an issue we are facing. At least, because let's say, for example, we have a Galera cluster and we notice that writes are kind of slow. I mean, they're much slower than usual. The overall write capacity is shrinking. So actually, the thing is that there might be really different culprits of this particular type of issue. So, for example, it can be an IO-related problem when, I don't know, let's say there is some kind of background process running on the node, some backup, or maybe the IO-bound query, which is using bunch of resources, large subset of the IO resources, and therefore it slows down the rest of the cluster and the rest of the operations on the cluster on this particular node. It can also be a CPU-related issue, like, well, obviously, for example, the node can be overloaded with the queries for some reason. Maybe there are some new queries were added recently with the last application release, or maybe some query execution plan changed, because it happens. from time to time, and the query plan is now a less optimal one, and therefore it's using much more CPU than it was using before. Or maybe there are some network problems, some glitches, some lost packets, or maybe we are using we are utilizing network resources fully, and basically we can't move more data through our network. And checking the host metrics, checking the graphs may point us into a correct direction regarding of where to investigate further. So somehow like initial investigation of where we should dig in. What to look at? Well, obviously CPU utilization, because it's from the capacity planning. I mean, when are we closing to the full, to the limits? Yes, I would say from my experience, I would say that like 50% of the CPU utilization for a node is optimal. More is kind of tricky because you still need to you want to have some room for to accommodate periodical spikes of activity or something like that. Network utilization. Well, it may sound surprising, but actually, when you check the the configurations of the nodes of the instances in a cloud environment, you may actually see that the network is pretty capped and pretty limited on the smaller instances. And it may become a problem. For example, let's say if you create a Galera arbitrator on a small instance in EC2, let's say. I mean, that's just perfectly fine in terms of the CPU utilization, but you have to keep in mind that the Galera arbitrator needs to get all the right set application traffic, and it may just overload its network pipe, how to speak. Obviously, we want to look at ping and network latency, because the Galera is very, let's say, may suffer really badly when the latency is not good. We want to look at disk throughput and I/O operations per second, because first of all, am I within my hardware limits? And it leads us to the fact that if you are buying a new hardware, whether cloud or not, you should be doing some benchmarks first to make sure that you understand your hardware limits and understand the capacity of the hardware to accommodate writes, CPU, and this kind of stuff. Because this is the basis on which you are building the capacity planning and your situation awareness. But also, I mean, the disk throughput is also another thing that is really may become problematic in cloud, because let's say, I mean, I think you wouldn't say that, let's say, 150 megabytes per second is a huge. I mean, it's a significant traffic. I mean, it's not small, but it shouldn't be a big problem. Yeah, we have SSDs, we have flash cards, we have whatever. Yeah, that's true. But then when you take a look at the EC2, for example, then you will see that only 4x large instances and larger can accommodate this kind of traffic. So it may become an issue, even quicker than you may think. Disk space, yeah. Well, again, for cloud, in this particular case, the cloud shines. Yes, you can take out the host, the node out of rotation, upgrade it, get it back. But when you're having your own data center, you have the host on premises, then you have to order disks. You have to wait for them to be delivered. You have to wait for them to be installed, and it may take a while. So again, this is something you may want to be looking at. And the memory utilization. Well, most of the time is pretty boring. let's say, because MySQL uses all the resources it's configured for, and that's it. But then it may happen once every X servers that that you will be suffering from some bugs and from the memory leak. And then the memory utilization will be a place where those graphs will be the place where you will notice that that the memory utilization going up. You're using more and more memory, and therefore it just may cause a crash eventually. So here we are some examples of the graphs that cluster control provides you. So like basic stuff: CPUs utilization, disk space, disk utilization in terms of the IOPS and disk throughput. So pretty simple data here. Also, we also want to see some data at the first glance. Here we have this overview of the host metrics. So basically, we have the information about the ping, so network latency. We have information about the CPU utilization and percent of the CPU that was stealed. I mean, this is the percentage of the time virtual CPU waits for the real CPU while the hypervisor is servicing another virtual core. So it may be a problematic. I mean, it may cause some unstable performance in virtualized environments. We can also see the load, we can see the network throughput, disk reads, disk writes, this kind of information. So, and it's also nice to have, because, for example, here we can, on the first glance, we can see that the 201 node is somewhat loaded. Load average is 44. CPU utilization is 100%, 1.0, I mean. So basically, yeah, this is something that tells you that this particular node is overloaded, that something is not right here, and we may want to take a look at it.